Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of big Finnish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 17th of June 2020, I am starting a look at the first story in the second trilogy of Older Nissa stories, Alan Barnes' Heroes of Sontar. Also the first big Finnish story to actually use the Sontarans in any sort of way. They appear in this story. They are the major villains. But before we're starting with part one. But before we begin, I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware that because in 2019 YouTube was caught data mining the information of underage users, therefore violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. They reached a settlement with the Supreme Court to implement new policy, which scapegoats creators and dodges responsibility. So I must make sure that this is very clear that this video is not meant for children. It is not advertised towards kids. It's not marketed towards kids. Yes, Doctor Who is a family show that kids can watch, but it isn't. But this video, as with all the videos on my channel, is aimed at the aims at the adult audience, and therefore can be discussing adult themes, so viewer discretion is advised. So Heroes of Sontar is actually, part one is mostly comedy. The Doctor, and a lot of it actually is just with the Sontarans. It's not with the Doctor being clever and all doctor, it's focusing right on the Sontarans, making them the focus, and sort of having them basically be a bumbling group of Sontarans instead of what the story could perhaps do, make them warmongers, make them comedic, but specifically making these Sontarans essentially rejects. The story takes place on Samar, which is this mossy planet that is like, I guess the idea is it's meant to be one of those planets that are, peaceful and happy, and of course there's this secret weapon, and Alan Barnes doesn't make it a secret that the Sontarans here are completely are completely sort of out of their depth and not necessarily able to really be the soldiers that perhaps they are meant to be. They really are out of their depth. I will say that one of the big problems here is that this is a lot of setup and a lot of exposition. It's good exposition. It's well written, but it is exposition. It kind of makes me feel like just sort of, okay, when are we actually going to get on with it here, instead of just sort of messing around with the Sontarans and messing around with the characters. Like Tegan is kind of written to be very, very very much a character who's like, yeah, I'm not the I'm complaining about, this entire story, um, and you don't really get to see perhaps what makes Tegan work, um, like, and Tegan just as a character, um, doesn't really, you don't really have, with everything that the story can do. Yeah, obviously, Alan Barnes is doing the whole thing where every story, the entire this arc has been doing the thing where every story leads into another. Like, there's a lot of discussion on what the Mara did with for Tegan, and how that's affected her, and that's very, very nice. But it's not necessarily where everything should have been, and I just don't think the comedy always works. It's, a lot of it works, and a lot of it is interesting, but it's not something that you really get, like. And there's this sort of idea that, like, there's a curse, sort of, kind of, which is, interesting, though that isn't really explored. It's all stuff that could be great and could be really, really interesting and really, really fun, um, but is something that you need a bit more time and a bit more, and just a bit more of things to be done to really, really get the, um, really, really get the story to work and to end well. Um, it's it's not the it's not perfect, but it is really, really enjoyable, and it does sort of set the tone, very much like the first part of Cradle of the Snake set the tone, for that story, that we are doing something more comedic. So overall, I'm going to give part 1 of Heroes of Sontar an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 19th of June 2020, and I just finished listening to part 2 of Heroes of Sontar. This second episode is special. It's not perfect, but it's definitely an interesting little thing that the story does. And it's not as fun as the first episode. It's actually a bit more boring. And I think that might come down to Alan Barnes' script not necessarily being the strongest. It's not a weak script, mind you. Alan Barnes has written weak scripts before. I've seen weak scripts before. It's an enjoyable episode. But it's doing the thing that the new series would do, and that's kind of playing the Sontarans for comedy. And honestly, it's not a great, it's not that great when you realize, oh, they're doing a comedic Sontaran story. Like, really, that is not meant to be, who the Sontarans are, what they do. They are. There's this whole, like, every main character of the Tars team gets a specific Sontaran. They're with the one Turlo's with. Turlo surrenders and becomes the Doctor surrenders to his surrender so they don't die, because I guess this is supposed to be satirizing, like, bureaucracy, and I guess the bureaucracy of war, which doesn't feel like it's weird. It almost feels like it's giving out this message of feel free to let, to kill, like, prisoners, it's it's a really really weird, um, you know, a really really weird way of, you know, just about, you know, everything. Um, it's not necessarily just it's not a really a story that you would expect Doctor Who to do. Like, I don't know if it's Alan Barnes' intention to come across as pro-war, but it almost is. Like, the Sontarans are ineffective, which is which is just it's something very odd. There's also almost something fantastical about this. Like, there's magic going on. Um, like, the Sumerians are almost like magical creatures, which is, you know, could be interesting and a fun little idea of you know, way to tell this story. Give them the magic and give them something cool. But I don't see that. I really don't. It mostly feels um, like this is just a story that's that's got itself where it is, and isn't really telling you, okay, these are the ideas we're playing with. This is who what we're about. It's more just here's weird stuff and not normal things. Um, yeah, it's it's so weird. I also don't like the characterization of Turlo as the complete coward. Um, Mainly because it doesn't feel like he is. He shouldn't necessarily. That's just not how he should be characterized. Like, he isn't entirely just a coward. That isn't really who he is. He's a bit more than that. He sort of isn't allowed to evolve in this script. Alan Barnes just kind of makes him the way he does, and it's not that great. You know, it really does. It just kind of feels very off and very very just kind of different. The Doctor also is just sort of figuring things out, and Tegan's there. It's all very much just a script that is kind of dull. Like, there are plenty of jokes made about. Again, there's just a lot of comedy, and it's almost like a parody of a Sontaran story, which I don't entirely think works. Like, it could work. Some of the jokes land, but some of them don't. So there's also stuff like, oh, your mileage may vary. It's just not what you were maybe expecting going in to a story like this. It's much more of just we have these characters. Nissa also doesn't get to do much. There's implication that she's sick with Richter syndrome. Though that hasn't really been like a plot point. I don't. It's just sort of an idea that's been mentioned as a possibility. It doesn't take the time to be explained, which again is a problem if you're, you know, trying to tell a story. You know, you want to see if the characters will be able to we will be able to see, you know, their stories explained and those things change because of that. That is something that that needs to be done well, and set up well, not just you know, brought to the forefront, but actually, you know, done. You know, it was this very very different different thing that the story kind of does, kind of doesn't do. It's overall weird. So overall, I probably have to give part 2 of Heroes of Sontar a 6 out of 10. Alright, it is the 20th of June 2020, and I just finished listening to part 3 of Heroes of Sontar. Yeah, my complaints from part 2 are still kind of there. I don't really think part 3 is an improvement. Actually, I think part 3 is the weakest episode so far, but the ending of it and the cliffhanger where it reveals that some stuff involving that there was a Rutan scout creating sort of the sort of witch guard ideas, and that sort of aspect of the story actually improves things quite a bit. And this is also an episode where there's much less comedy, or at least the comedy seems a bit more subtle here, and few and far between as the actual as Alan Barnes is actually trying to do something with a bit more tension and a bit more of a sort of a bite to it. It's something, something that is actually really important for writing, that you actually, get your attention right, and you write your story so that you actually get to see what the characters are doing and what things need doing. Something that isn't always present in stories. It's something that actually this story hasn't, and it's what the story hasn't been doing well. Because I do really like the ending, and I do actually like the Doctor self-sacrificing himself for these Sontarans. Still really don't like the bureaucracy aspect of things. That is brought up a couple of times here. It just seems really unnecessary. Like, they're like, okay, we have a story with Sontarans, and we're making them, again, we're making them comedy Sontarans. So, like, it's just, with something like that, you don't really get to see, perhaps what Alan Barnes was intending, and how Alan Barnes can really make a good story, because Alan Barnes is a good writer. We will cover more of his stories. We've covered some of his good stories already, if I'm remembering properly. He is a writer who knows how to write. But Heroes of Sontar isn't perhaps his finest moment, mainly because it is doing just a bunch of different things, and a bit different odd things. Like there is this whole reveal in this episode that Nyssa has Richter syndrome, and she is dying. It is actually brought out here to be really, really one of those stories where it's like, right, we're going to be setting up an actual continuation and an actual conclusion. It's something different, and all of that is kind of brought to be something very different, and very, very weird. And it does try to be something new, which could be great. It's you bring these characters, you create drama, but it's setting up that drama isn't necessarily something that I think, I don't think it's something that the story should have to do. It's just done with this very, very different sort of thing. You don't get to see everything done. It's a very, very weird sort of story. It's not the standard standard story. And yeah, there is the whole idea of, okay, we're doing a story all about these different this different these different things, and um, this sort of different plot, and with this whole stuff with everything going on. It just doesn't feel like it should. It doesn't feel like it should be doing what it's doing. It's more of just sort of being there, and being a story that isn't necessarily what the entire plot can do. Just sort of given a little bit of time and a little bit of things to keep the plot going. It's something that I don't think you can argue is this great, this sort of great thing. It just sort of is there. It's not amazing. And part of that, it's weird. It should be like all the Sontarans sound interesting, which is great, and all of the, like, everything is interesting. There's this whole prophecy. It's playing around with stuff that should be interesting, but just isn't. Like it's all there, and all asking these questions just to see what can we do. It's not the entire story. It's just what it does. Overall, it's not a great episode. It's just trying to sort of tell a story. So I'm probably gonna have to give part 3 of Heroes of Sontar a 4 out of 10. Okay, it is the 21st of June 2020. I just finished listening to part 4 of Heroes of Sontar, the concluding episode of the story, and an episode that I don't like. It's not worse than the third episode. It's about on par with the third episode. But the story itself just doesn't do it for me. And by that I mean it feels very much like a story that could be amazing, could be great, could do some really, really cool things, but doesn't. This is the episode where Alan Barnes, I guess, tries to justify the comedy. And by that I mean he explains away the comedy as basically being all about all sorts of basically being a comedic push at um, at just about um, at what you think they're doing. Um, it's all in favor of telling uh, you know not necessarily telling an amazing story, but telling a story that is good enough. Um, it's good enough, and it's different, and it plays around with things. Um, there is there is the entire stuff with the story, um, because this just isn't great. It's just sort of there. Like, the whole idea is that these aren't the best Sontarans. They're the rejects of the clones, and the whole curse was actually a Sontaran thing. The Rutens aren't actually involved, even though there's a Ruten scout ship that saves the Doctor. That's all very confusing, and something that I just it's not doesn't make as much sense as perhaps the writing intended, or even thought it could be. It's something where you don't get to see what the story is actually doing. You just kind of hope for the best, um, and in hoping for the best, you really really uh, get everything done. Um, you know, it's it's just about everything is there. I I will say it's definitely an interesting little idea. I like sort of the mythology behind it, even if the mythology isn't great, but it's interesting mythology. There is the idea of what the story is doing. Um, it's just not it's just not that interesting, and it's not as interesting as it thinks it is. Um, and there's actually some really emotional moments with Nissa confronted with her own death, saying uh, that basically telling Tegan, don't tell the Doctor about his son, explaining the events of Circular Time Winter, which we covered earlier, though that technically takes place right after, in the last scene of the final story, of the Fifth Doctor. Um, it's not the it's not what the story can be. It's more what the story does, um, and makes everything, uh, and it sort of just makes everything work, um, and and be different. It's something something really 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 weird, um, and indifferent. And again, it's not necessarily all explained. It's not the worst thing ever written. Um, it's about okay. Um, you know, it's one of those things where you have um, you have everything um, everything built up around the characters, and you built up an interesting idea, even if it's not perfect. It's something enjoyable, It's a really, really good sort of thing. And I really do think that this could have been great. It just doesn't stand. Um, it doesn't stand to be great. It's a very, very different sort of thing. Um, it just it just doesn't follow through with being different and being fully weird. Like, as much as I at least enjoy some of the crazy and some of the character moments, but just that is the enjoyment doesn't really outlast where the story fails, and kind of does in fact fall a little bit apart. There's just a good idea, and I can't fault the cast for this. I just think it's all really the script. So overall, I am gonna have to give Part 4 of Heroes of Sontar a 4 out of 10. That being said, we added the scores and averaged them out to give Heroes of Sontar a final score of 5.5 out of 10. Thank you everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we take a look at the first audio drama to really sort of delve into the backstory of Turlo as a character, much earlier than any of the television show tried to do with Doctor Who Kiss of Death.